The Fantasy Skirmisher.
Today we're going to do a casual review of the game Dark Blades, which is an extension of a medieval man-to-man combat game called Cry Havoc. So Dark Blades is the fantasy version of that, and Dark Blades is actually a named character. His name is Tristan, who is leading the humans against the monsters in the land of Labyrinthia. Dark Blades was published by Standard Games and Publications Limited back in 1986. And the game comes with 2 maps, which is unfortunate. Also, it has a campaign map, which we'll take a quick look at, as well as the rule book and a couple of quick reference sheets, and lots of counters. And there are multiple counters for each individual. And for those who are mounted, even more. So for example, let's take a look at Sunfire. And all the humans go by their names. And Sunfire, I can see, has 2 mounted counters here. And then she has 2 unmounted chits as well. So for her mounted self, the stats, whether monster or human or elf or dwarf or whatever, all have the same stats. So the black number on the top left is their attack strength. And then on the right hand side is their defense strength, which is the red number. And then on the bottom is their movement. For here, mounted is 12. And then this is her full strength counter. If she gets wounded, then she has her wounded side, and you can see that the stats are reduced, with the exception of movement here. And on the reverse has the horse, either unmounted, and this one is a little off-centered. The other ones I noticed are centered well, but anyway, it is what it is. And then, of course, you've got the horse that died. And you do leave dead characters and horses and mules on the map because they can impact the terrain, okay, as far as movement, things like that. So here is her full strength side with her combat, defense, and movement. And then her wounded side, which you can see is reduced. And on the back, you have her dead, and also Sunfire, who is stunned. Stunned people can recover the following turn, where at the end, you just flip it over from stunned to her recovered side. All right, let me put her back because she is in the game here for the first scenario. Now, just a quick look at the rule book. The rule book comes in 3 parts. So the first part is background information. So it has a history of Labyrinthia, and basically it had more of a fairy tale type setting because creatures and humans got along, respected each other, but then men being men were unable to leave perfection alone, as it says here, and began to want more. So greed set in. They started using the creatures as, for menial labor, things like that. And then finally, those creatures became, in the minds of humans, monsters, things that they needed to hunt down. So, of course, the monsters revolted, and they started attacking men's homes and horses, upsetting the farming communities, destroying plows and other equipment, crippling horses, and other various atrocities. And a new type of monster came out. They're like the Uruk-hai of the orcs, and these are called mon-ogres. So they're really tough monsters, toughest in the game. Well, besides, of course, the dragon, right? And they're led by a female mon-ogre called the Black Fox. So this game centers around a character named Dark Blades. His real name is Tristan D. Riker, who is like a Baron type character, and he's a fabulous fighter. He has 2 black blades, a sword, and dagger, which is where he got his name that the monsters call him, which is Dark Blades. And that's a good thing, because I think a big weakness of this game is that it only has 2 maps that have very prominent features, such as the arena, right here. All right, now, that was the second section. And then the third section, of course, are the rules. And it's got rules for movement, rules for terrain, and then rules for combat, both melee and for ranged combat. And then finally, it has 4 scenarios. Another weakness of this game, only 4 scenarios and 2 maps. Now, I know in 1986 this game did not cost $100, that this game set me back, but I do have a minty copy. And probably people who bought this game also had Cry Havoc and perhaps other games in this series where they could draw on that on their maps, because the 4th scenario requires maps from Cry Havoc, the Crossroads, and the Village, which is just ridiculous. So therefore, there's only 3 scenarios in this game that use these maps. But I have a solution for that. We'll talk about, my final thoughts. So we're in the middle of the game here, scenario 1, the arena, and basically what happened is that we had Tristan, Dark Blades here, allow himself to be captured by the enemy in hopes to draw the Black Fox in. So therefore, they could ambush the Black Fox and hopefully, win this war against the monsters. So Dark Blade's allies were all hiding on this side of the river and the lake up here in the trees. Because, in the flavor text says they're hiding in the trees. So that's where I put them. And the monsters, and in this case it's black dwarves and also goblins, are surrounding the arena, which is a depression in the land here. You can see a little door here where they have arena combat. And Dark Blades killed I guess what they're called, dwalks. A dwalk is like a hybrid between a mon-ogre and a dwarf. And the other monster are the black dwarves. So they're kind of distracted watching all the fun and action. Meanwhile, since the dragon came out, they realized that Black Fox is not going to come. And so Tristan, or the Dark Blades allies, started moving in to save Dark Blades as well as kill the monsters. And the goal of this scenario is for the monsters, kill Dark Blades, and for the humans, it's to kill all the monsters on the map. Oh, I almost forgot. So Tristan, or Dark Blade's allies, they don't get noticed by the enemy until they move within 5 hexes. Then they get noticed, and then combat could ensue. So they kind of crept up, and then in one turn were able to charge, did so. At least most of them. Some people are pretty slow because moving across the stepping stones, costs 2 movement points each. All right, so that is the 3 components of the rule book. Now let's take a look at the sequence of play. So the turn is broken into the first player's half and then the second player's half, and the game rules refer to as half turns. So the first player, as designated by the scenario, the first thing they will do is the spellcaster can cast a spell if they're able to. Then all missile-armed troops may shoot if they're able to. Then the third step is that all characters can move. Now there are exceptions to this. So if a character is affected by magic, they may not be able to move. Also, bow-armed troops who fired in the previous step can only move half their movement allowance. Crossbowmen cannot move and shoot in the same turn. Then after they did not cast a spell in the first step, They can all friendly characters who are stunned during the opponent's last half of the turn are flipped over. Unburnt trolls flip back to their next stage, and there are specific rules for trolls. And then after the first player goes through all those steps, the second player does the same. Now let's take a look at magic first. So for magic, if both players have a spellcaster, out of the 24 spell cards, you shuffle it up and then you draw 8 each, discard the rest face down, so you don't know exactly who or what spells the other player has. It's not a big deal for solitaire play. It really isn't. So what I did is I drew 8 cards, and it also has, basically says you can do whatever you want as far as the spell rules and what spells you take or how many. This is kind of sandboxy type of game system. All right, so in this game that I'm playing right now, Quill is my spellcaster. So at the start of the turn, he cast a spell at the black dwarf who is here watching the action below. And he cast Magic Arrow, and so it's a directional 20 hexes and line of sight. It's immediate at the time of the casting, and uninjured characters such as that black dwarf became wounded. So I took off his full strength side, set it aside. So now we got a wounded character. I guess what I could do is just put the full strength side under here, because on the back side there's stunned and also the dead counter. All right, so that's magic. Very basic, right? And there's some pretty cool spells. Wizard Whirl, Magic Carpet, Shield. I drew a second Wizard Whirl. There's 2 of each type of spell. Fire Burst, and here it says Area of Effect B. There is a chart in the rules that shows what that looks like. So very, very easy, very straightforward. Now let's take a look at missile combat. For missile combat, you do not use that character's strength. There we go. You would not use strength 6. What you would do is that you would look at this chart here for missile attack strengths. And in this game, there's short bows and crossbows. That's it. And then you've got short, medium, and long range. And this would be short range if you took a shot at this black dwarf archer right here. And so, therefore, his short bow would have a strength of 20. The crossbowman right here would have, in short range, a strength of 30, even better. So what you would do is just do the odds ratio of the strength, say 20 divided by the, in this case, defense of 4, and then do the ratio, and then you just roll on the chart. Now he was already wounded. The archer, the bow, missed. The crossbowman hit and wounded this character here. So you got combat tables, missile results against mounted opponents, and then you have missile results against infantry. And then what you do is do the odds, and then roll the die, cross-reference for the result, and see what that result is. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. Now let's take a look at melee combat. And there's 3 combats that happened here. This one already took place. And so my knight here was able to make the black dwarf retreat. And this black dwarf was previously wounded by the magic arrow from the wizard Quill here. Now, Sunfire and Dark Blades. Dark Blades was able to move up to try to get out of the arena and away from this dragon since the action started. And I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I think I did, but none of the monsters could move until the humans got within 5 spaces. I think I mentioned that already. So now kind of things have loosened up, and now it's a big combat. All right, so in this situation, if Dark Blades was in the same train type as Sunfire, they could just combine their attack factors together into one and to attack this poor goblin who only has a defense of 2. In this case here, they're not able to do it, need to attack separately just because the goblin would get partial cover from Darkblade since he's on a slope. And how you determine that? Well, you've got the terrain effects charts, and then you have the effects of terrain on combat. So it has the dash as disadvantage, neutral, or advantage. So if you have an attacker in, say, neutral ground attacking a disadvantaged character, you would move 1 right on the column of the combat results table. So you do have column shifts that could benefit or be a disadvantage to you depending on the terrain and the situation. So it's really easy to look at and cross-reference, and it's very straightforward as what the movement allowance is for the terrain and what type of cover it provides, such as light, medium, or none, and then any special rules if there's any, such as for the water. All right, now, so in this situation here, we've got Homley, who has 14 attack strength, to the dwarf's 8. So not quite 2-to-1. This is a 1-to-1 combat. And so what you would do is look at the appropriate combat table. And in this case would be infantry against infantry. There's also infantry against mounted, mounted against mounted, and mounted against infantry. And so what we do is roll the d10. Here it is. Okay, rolled a 10 on 1-to-1, and you can see that it is no effect. So the lower the number, the better it is. So infantry against infantry, A is attacker wounded, B is attacker retreats 1 hex, then C is defender retreats 1 hex, D is defender stunned, E is defender wounded, F is defender killed. And so the different types of combats are just baked into the tables here with the different results. Because, with mounted against mounted, defenders, horse become unharmed, rider dismounted and stunned. There's a lot more that could happen in, say, mounted combat. But again, very straightforward. It's very old school. Just creating a ratio with attack strength, defense strength, any terrain modifiers, roll the die, see what happens. Overall, the rules are quite clear. Taking into account all the different terrain types and what the modifiers are and how much it costs to move, line of sight, things like that. The water is pretty interesting. It has some really cool rules for the water because there is a chance that you can get knocked into the water, and water is impassable. And if that's the case, there's you would roll a die on a 1, 2, 3, or 4. You may crawl out and make a full move. 5 to 10, you roll again using the chart. So if you fall into the lake, you would roll a die, and you could move 2 hexes downstream and 1 hex towards the nearest bank, or 1 towards the furthest bank, or 3 hexes downstream. Or if you roll a 9 or a 10, you drown. And pretty much, it's the same for the river as well. Move 4 or 6 hexes downstream, 9 or 10, you drown. But if you hit this mill wheel here, if you're going downstream, you hit the mill wheel, you automatically die. So that's kind of a fun little touch there. I really can't recommend or not recommend this game. I think you already have an idea if this is a game that you'd like to seek out. It is outdated as far as a lot of its mechanics, even though it's got some really good rules elements. At the same time, it has some really good retro charm to it as well. Some of the things I don't care for is that this is a combat game, but I like for the combat to be just a little bit more spicier. So as you know, it's got combat results tables for the different types of units, mounted, infantry, and combination thereof. But it doesn't have any facing rules. How easy would it be to have on a hex grid map a counter that has the front facing and the rear facing, right? So if you attack an enemy from their back facing area on the hexes, have a column shift to the right. A lot of modern games do that. It'd be real easy, to integrate that in this game without affecting the balance or anything like that, and make it a little bit more tactical. Speaking of a little bit more tactical, we've got a lot of mounted units in this game, but there's no rules for charging. Yes, there's a combat table for mounted versus infantry, but what if, you have, a mounted unit that moves or charges into an infantryman who is in open terrain, right, with no cover or anything like that? You should be able to get a combat shift to the right. So again, that adds another tactical element where you got to kind of watch those infantrymen, if there's mounted units, on the enemy side, because you have to make better use of terrain perhaps. So those are easy fixes. My other criticism of this game I've already talked about is that the game only has 2 maps, and they're pretty specific maps, with the river and lake, and then the big giant arena. There's no kind of generic terrain map that you could use for a lot of different scenarios, but there is a fix to that. So Noble Knight Games sells fan-made maps, and they're beautiful, and they come in a wide variety of terrain types, so that way you can make your own scenarios, and using the Labyrinthium map with all the information in the rule book, you can create your own campaigns, and that is an aspect of the game I do like. Another thing that, speaking of fans, that this game has going for it is that it has a dedicated following with their own fan website, just as much as, just kind of like Magic Realm has a dedicated website to the game, so does this. It's called cryhavocfan.org, and there you could find all the different games, PDFs of the components, additional rules, and I'm sure there's a lot of other content there as well, since it is fan made, but I haven't fully explored it yet. So I do plan to pick up a couple extra maps for this game, play around with it with my additions to the combat rules, which would be really simple to integrate, and I think it could turn a wholly average game into an above average game. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time on the Fantasy Skirmisher. Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.